Hi everyone, Miss Barker here. We're going to start this 4-day week with some review. I'm going to read our learning target on top of the screen. It is, we will calculate the mean, median, mode, and range of a data set. So we've done some work on this year, and you've also worked in science with Mr. Hinkie on this year. These 4 days are going to be some review, and then we will do 1 day next week of some real world problems. So the first thing we're going to start out with today is finding mean. First, we need to set out our definition for mean. The mean of a data set is the average of that data set. And I know that might not be exactly helpful, but once we start working on these, and we're going to keep it pretty simple today with the problems we're doing and the problems you're doing on your independent practice, I think it will all come back to you. Now, when we find the mean or the average of the data set, really what we're doing is leveling out the data set. And the way that we do that is by adding all of the values in the data set and then dividing them by how many there are. That will give us the average amount. And once we start to do this with real world problems too, I think you'll see a lot more connections to real world problems like average amounts of points scored or average height. Okay, now on the side of the screen, I'm going to kind of write a little how-to or the steps that we take to calculate the mean of a data set. There are 2 steps that you do every time. The first is to add or find the sum of all of the values. So kind of pretend this is an anchor chart you're seeing like up on the wall in our classroom. So I'm going to start by doing that first. We're going to go through and look at our data set and add the values. Now, when you guys do this little practice unit on mean, median, mode, and range, it is okay with me if you use your calculators. You will see when we get to the real world problems that some of the values are a little bit larger than this. I would suggest that you try and calculate the sum by hand first, or using all those addition strategies, regrouping strategies. Now you're going to watch me model how to do a couple of these problems, and what I'm going to do is keep doing what I would do if this were on our smartboard in our classroom. Even though addition might seem really super simple for you right now as 5th graders, especially with the values here on the screen that are pretty small, remember, a lot of us make mistakes regrouping, and you've seen me do it a whole bunch of times. So try and find a strategy that works for you to stay organized so that that is not the issue that you're having. You know me, I like to group tens or group numbers to make them a little bit more friendly to add. Right away, when I look at these two, I see that 3 and 7 make a 10, and I see that 2 and 1 make a 5. So I kind of simplified that problem to, instead of 3 plus 7 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2, just 10 plus 5. And I am going to get the sum of 15. Okay, now that's step 1. I'm going to use a different colored marker for step 2. Step 2, what we're going to do is divide by how many numbers or how many values are in our set. I'm just going to abbreviate here. I'm going to write numbers and data set. So I kind of cross those off in my work to add them all up and kind of regroup them. So I'm going to erase that quick, and then we can just go through and count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we're going to be dividing by 5. Hopefully this is very easy mental math for all of you. I'm not even going to do a whole bunch of computation here. You could either use skip counting, or hopefully this is one of your fast facts. And I know that the mean of this data set is 3. And again, we got that by adding up all of our values in our data set and then dividing by how many values are in the data set. Just counting them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 15 divided by 5 gets us a mean of 3. That is the average of that data set. We added them all up and leveled them out by dividing. Okay, here's another problem to practice our learning target. We're going to look at this data set and calculate the mean. Again, our steps are to add all of the values, and then once we have that sum, that total, we're going to divide by how many values are in the data set. I know when we practice this in class a little bit this year, some of you like to write your divided by right away before you crossed out those values or when to organize them in a certain way. If you think that's helpful for you, that is okay. I see there are 2, 4, 6, 7 values in our set. So whatever our sum is, after adding all of those numbers up, we're going to be dividing that sum by 7. Okay? Okay, now here's where this gets a little bit tricky. Again, I know you're fifth graders, you know how to add and regroup. I understand that, but it is so easy to make mistakes. So again, I want to encourage you to use any strategy that you think is easiest for you. I like to make friendly numbers and combine numbers where I think I see a benefit. Okay. Now, that's okay if you don't want to do that, but I'm just going to kind of model how I break this down. Right here, I see that 6 and 9 is a 15, and 5 plus 15 gives me a 20. So now I've already knocked out those three values, and I only have the other four to deal with. Okay, now I also see here I have 4 plus 4 gives me an 8, plus a 10 is 18, and then another 18. So now I've kind of simplified those 7 numbers down to 3, and 2 of those happen to be really easy for me to add. I know that 18 plus 18 is 36, and 36 plus 20 gives me 56 as my sum. Okay. Now, if you want to choose to do that differently, that is okay. If you want to line them up by place value, that is okay. So I got my sum of 56. Now I'm going to take my sum and divide by how many numbers are in my set. I know that 56 divided by 7 is equal to 8. So the mean of this data set, the average of this data set, is 8. Okay, I'm hoping you noticed that the first two were very easy numbers to divide. Those are those multiplication facts using your fact fluency that you should just know right away. So you probably haven't had to do a whole lot of thinking with the division. Now, this problem is going to be a little bit more difficult, and I'm going to explain why once we get to our sum and start working on our division. So I'm hoping you notice that instead of just having a set of numbers, our data is in a line plot. So one thing that we might want to do before we even start adding is by pulling that data out of the line plot. This is a pretty simple line plot. I can tell that each value only happens once. So I'm just going to make a list of these real quick on the side of the screen. I can tell we have 1, 4, and 110, and 112, and 116. So we only have 4 numbers in our data set, and you might be thinking, oh, this is going to make this division really easy. So let's start by finding our sum of all of our values. Again, I'm going to keep using making friendly numbers for addition because for me, if I line these all up by place value, yes, I can add and regroup, but for me, it's just a little bit easier to look at them and think about what numbers can I pair together to make friendly numbers to add instead of doing a whole bunch of regrouping by place value. So right away, I see, and I'm going to use my red marker to do this, I see that I have a 16 and a 14. And I know those two numbers together make 20. And now I think I can do the rest pretty easy with mental math. I'm going to be adding 12 and 10 to that. And I kind of added them up by place value, like I can see lining up my 1s and 10s on the screen. So 2 and 4. Okay, so we have a total of 42. Now, I know right off the top of my head that the next step is going to be to divide by 4 because there are 4 numbers in our data set. But when I look at this problem, it's not like the first two where I can just use my fact fluency to help me out. Because 42 isn't equally divisible by 4. 42 is not a multiple of 4. So instead, what I want you guys to use, if this happens and you have one of those numbers where you're going to have a remainder, instead of writing remainder 1, we're going to use our decimal remainders. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of give you a review on how to do that. So you're still going to do the same division problem. I'm actually going to use the standard algorithm. That's how we get our decimal remainders. I'm going to do 42 divided by 4. Okay, so I'm going to look right here. I can do either, I know that 10 times 4 is 40. So I'm going to do that first. And then instead of writing remainder 2 up here, because we could still call that our mean value 10 remainder 2, but I want you to practice putting this into a decimal. So remember, we can't divide this 2 by 4. We can't break 2 into 4 equal groups as whole numbers. So what you do is put a decimal right here. I'm actually going to do this in yellow so it kind of really stands out. You're going to put a decimal value right here. And what that decimal is, it's like you signing a contract saying, I know I can't break 2 into 4 equal pieces and get a whole number answer. It's going to be a piece of a whole number, just like a fraction. The decimal is just like a fraction, a piece of a whole number. And once you do that, you're going to bring a 0 down. And I like for you to draw that arrow. I know when you do this on your independent practice, it's going to be a little bit tricky to do an arrow. But I have been noticing a lot of you haven't been showing a whole bunch of work on your independent practice. And it's really important to do this step by step because not every problem is going to be this simple. Okay, now once I've done that, I can look at this number 20 and ask myself how many times can 4 go into 20 or what times 4 equals 20? And that answer is 5. Zero left over. Okay, so our mean is 10 and a half or 10 and 5 tenths. Um, and we know that this is our mean. So this is the average of this data set. So I'm going to write equals mean here. Okay, that is all of the practice we're going to do together. So try this out on your independent practice. I think there are about 4 problems on there. Remember, you can use a calculator to check your work. I'd like you to try addition and the division all by yourself first. If you need to show your work on a different piece of paper, that is totally okay.